Today I sit down with Alexander Bannister, the CEO of Fractional Mining and the YouTube channel Tactical Investing. Fractional Mining is a project that allows the average retailer to participate in crypto mining once purchasing an NFT. From there, you'll be earning shared rewards from that particular mine. Now, this is the third crypto mining project I've actually covered on the channel, but what makes them different than the other projects I've talked about is that they use flare gas, making it one of the cheapest ways to mine on the market. Here at Better Blockchain, I'm not advocating that anyone invest in these types of projects without thorough research and a very high risk tolerance. This is just simply a conversation that I get to have to learn more about the project. Now, if you do like these types of videos with me sitting down with founders and having these types of conversations, be sure to like and subscribe for new videos coming out every single week. And sign up for the newsletter on my news site, cryptogram247.com. We'll be doing giveaways via the email list sometime in 2023. Now on to the interview, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Better Blockchain. Today, I'm sitting down with Alexander Bannister, the CEO of Fractional Mining. You might know him from his YouTube channel, Tactical Investing. I want to thank you so much for coming on, man, and I'm excited to talk with you.
Absolutely, Chris. You and I have kind of known each other a little bit. I've watched some of your videos before in the past. It's a very tight-knit community when it comes to crypto specifically. So I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to talking about crypto.
Yeah, it is a small community when you really look at it. And I want you to talk about what fractional mining is, just kind of the elevator pitch about what it is that you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. So fractional mining is built on the backbone of Flare. Now, Flare itself is not really an intricate process. It's not new technology by any means. But the process of capturing that flare, converting it, or technically capturing the natural gas, converting it into electricity for proof of work or Bitcoin mining is a newer concept. So that's kind of what we're building upon in the essence of the backbone of fraction mining. Now, on top of that, fraction mining has two aspects, two faucets: the business to business aspect, where we work with whether crypto projects or very well-known brands in the crypto mining space, to provide them a service and get them connected specifically to a better version of proof of work cryptocurrency mining. And then on the business to customer aspect, specifically within the crypto project itself, is just pretty much breaking down the barriers to proof of work crypto mining when it comes to the price of ASICs, the hosting cost of electricity, and then on top of that, the experience, the loud noises, the heat, and all of that, and the limitations of hosting the miners themselves. So we've kind of broken those barriers via NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and actually started giving utility to NFTs outside of just monkey JPEGs.
Yeah, and that's a way to kind of, for a retail investor, if they were wanting to get in, they could diverse some risk. But to kind of take a step back, how does this differ from regular or traditional mining?
Yeah, so Chris, when you have typical mining right now, the major narrative when it comes to Bitcoin mining, and this was portrayed in many ways by the state of New York when they pretty much said, hey, we're banning, in a very broad sense, we're banning mining because it's bad for the environment. So you have this continual narrative that's been built and showcased to the world that Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment because of the usage of electricity, carbon emissions, and everything to that extent, because the majority of mining is on grid. But when you actually take a deeper look into crypto mining, the majority of mining is actually based off of a clean resource of energy. Now, fraction mining itself and flare mining is 100% off grid. So that means it's not connected to the grid in any way, shape, or form. And there are pros and cons to that. Now, flare mining itself, typically when you have an oil site, they have to, the excess methane, natural gas, they typically burn it off because the cost of piping that natural gas to be able to sell that is extremely expensive, and it's typically out of budget for a lot of your operations that are mining oil or fracking oil. And for them, it's just easier on site to just burn it. And burning it is much better than just releasing the methane itself, even though there are some that just release the methane, which is even worse for the environment. So you've got this technology that was developed, from my understanding, out of Texas A&M, I've got a connection to a friend of mine that knows the guys who designed this technology. And this technology is now being used by the likes of ExxonMobil, who's now mining Bitcoin through a pilot company they've invested into called Crucial Energy. So what they do is you take the methane that normally gets burned off, the natural gas, you put that into a generator. The generator then uses that, puts out electricity to power Bitcoin miners. And it could power anything really. I mean, you could have data servers, you can have a lot of things that consume the electricity produced. But in this instance, for fraction mining specifically, we're taking that energy or the electricity that's converted from the energy to power proof of work crypto mining. So this way, you're reducing carbon emissions that normally methane gets burned off. You're capturing that, putting it, cleaning it up before it gets released into the environment. So by the time that it goes through the mining process, it's like 100 times better for the environment than just releasing the methane or burning it off like is typical for a lot of operations.
And I mean, there's so many different types of mining right now. And would you say, I mean, what makes this one kind of stand out? I guess one question I wanted to ask was what's the break-even point of your mining operation? Like if Bitcoin goes down to a certain point, like I talked to Hydro Whales and I believe theirs was 10 or 11K. And then, so just what's your take on that?
Yeah, so there's kind of two aspects, and Sam Pittman and I have been messaging back and forth. We're supposed to get on a call and talk soon. So, there's two aspects because there are alternative versions to Flare. Now, the alternative versions such as solar or hydro are probably the most popular, that are the most easily accessible, if you will. The reason being is, one, it's a form of clean energy, right? It's very favorable to the narrative of Bitcoin mining. It's not harmful for the environment. Now, the problem with what you have with hydro and with solar is that is still a very large market for something like that. And people perceive value in the underlying energy. People see solar as very valuable. People perceive the fact of, and it's capturable. Hydro, it's existent, it's valuable. People want to capture the electricity provided from hydro. So the opposite, if you do a 180, when you look at the aspect of natural gas and methane, that just gets burnt off. It's a complete waste for those oil operators. For them, their money gets made in the oil, and they're willing to take the hit of just burning off all that gas. So when you're able to come in and say, hey, we're going to pay you for something that you are burning off that you consider to be a complete waste, you're able to get the cost of that specific energy at a fraction of what you would get amongst anything else when it comes to the energy cost of hydro or solar. So that's really the major difference, Chris, is you have an aspect of something that's wasteful, that's trash to a lot of oil operators, and you're saying, hey, we'll pay you for your trash, right? And so at that point, you have minimal cost. Now, when it comes to the actual cost of the electricity, we could easily be, with the owning of the infrastructure, we could be sub $6,000 Bitcoin, no problem, and still be mining profitably. There's really no level of comparison compared to something that you're getting that's completely wasteful and turning it into one man's trash and another man's treasure. And that's exactly what's happening when it comes to this. And the opportunity of it is extremely vast. You're talking about $100 billion worth of methane gets burned off every single year. So when you're capturing that value for pennies on the dollar compared to alternative solutions, it's a win for jobs, win for the environment, and a win for Bitcoin and its narrative.
Yeah, and I want to ask you a question about, I guess, what are some of the cons, right? Like we know that the sun isn't going anywhere, right? Like, but what about this? Like, how long do you see something like this being foreseeable in the future? Like, what's the longevity like, I guess? And then also, what are some of those other cons that you see?
Yeah, so, I wish everything was rainbows and butterflies. But, when it comes to Flare, there's an unlimited, I wouldn't say unlimited, but there is a vastly untapped resource when it comes to flaring sites. I mean, you're talking about, the one specifically we're working with in Texas is 20 megawatts. You're there right now. We're working there with our partner for another 100 megawatt site. I mean, you're talking about operations, and these are just two small sites. And at that point, the United States isn't even the largest producer of flare, if you will, isn't the largest flaring country. I mean, there's multiple countries outside of the United States. Canada is extremely massive. Mexico is extremely massive. And on top of that, you've got, a lot of Europe, specifically in the UK. They've been complaining about the amount of flaring that happens could power 700,000 homes. So, you're talking about just a vast amount of flaring worldwide is really, really untapped. And outside of just oil, you have, a lot of your like trash dumps or your like big like compost landfills and all that. They do flaring. You've got a lot of like animal waste sites. They do flaring. So there's a lot of flaring outside of just oil, but it's mostly the predominant. Now, there's two specific cons, if you will, to flaring. The first being that, well, that source at that site isn't unlimited, right? Wells eventually dry up. So that's why you have to do kind of a study. That's why we have a specific partner that knows that side of the infrastructure. They do all of the geographical studies. They make sure they test. They do run through all their tests to kind of see how much energy is at that site and how long it'll be there. I mean, you've got some sites that will last 3 years. You've got some that will last 10 years. So at that point, you could be, depending on the longevity of the site, could be hopping from site to site every 10 years, if you will. Could be longer, could be shorter. That's kind of one of the cons. Now, on top of that, depending on the operation that you're running, because it is off grid, there's kind of some negatives that if you're an on-grid electricity, it's a little bit more consistent because flip your light switch on anytime you want at the house, unless power goes down or something to that extent. Now, when it comes to being off grid, you're powered by generators. It's just like a engine, if you will, constant maintenance. You're going to have maintenance times when those generators are going to be down for maintenance. Oil changes. I mean, you're going to have just like a normal maintenance on any generator. So that's kind of one of the cons, depending on the brands, and you get what you pay for. So depending on the type of generator you buy, making sure that everything's in stock. If you have to replace a part, there is processes where you can have like a Gen plus one. So let's just say you had like 10 generators and you had one that was just on the sideline. So if one went down, you power up the other one, continue mining. So there are alternative methods. The uptime, I would say, is not as perfect as on grid. On grid, you can easily see like 98, 99% of uptime. When it comes to off grid, if you have a Gen plus one, you're probably looking about 95%. But a lot of that value that you get from just the margin makes up for all the difference of like the 3 to 5%, if you will, uptime difference.
Okay, interesting. And I want to ask you, before I get into kind of the specifics of what it is that you're mining, sure. I want to ask you kind of like a meta question and to see if you know this or not. But do these methods that have lower break-even price points on Bitcoin, is that going to affect the overall price of Bitcoin, since some of the cost attributed to Bitcoin is associated with the mining cost itself? Or like let's say everyone were to switch over to Flare and Hydro and solar, and then because everyone's talking about the next Bitcoin halving, electricity, all the supply, all this other stuff. What's your take on that, I guess?
Yeah, so like specifically, like what if everyone moved to Flare, right?
Flare or anything, just anything cheaper. But Flare, I feel like, is a component now. Like this is in the equation. So yeah, Flare.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, if that were to happen, right, because there is a value derived from Bitcoin mining simply from the cost associated to get into mining Bitcoin, right? So I think there's kind of two aspects to it, right? Not everyone has the know-how or the experience to get into Flare or has the connections to be able to do so. And then a lot of them also on grid is so much easier, right? If you're trying to spin up something, it's way easier to move on grid, build a big old warehouse than to take the extra steps, take the hassle of containers, the gensets, the hookup, all of that specifically. For a lot of your publicly traded companies, when you look at your Riot, your Marathon, your Hut 8s, they specifically are wanting to appeal to shareholders, right? What's the lowest bang for your buck? Now, for them specifically, the easiest method to get into scale isn't Flare. Flare, I don't think, in my personal opinion, is as scalable as on grid because it's not as available. It takes time. It's not something that you can just like move in ready kind of thing. So I think, futuristically, it's definitely a smaller company game. And it's not something I don't think it may turn in the future. You've got ExxonMobil getting involved. I think big names, we see Shell specifically getting involved into the cooling solution of Bitcoin mining. I think they could also get into something similar to ExxonMobil, have a pilot company, get into flare mining. So I don't know. I mean, I think the overall impact is there's definitely going to be a shift more to flare. But I think what you'll probably see is the owners of those sites say, hey, I actually have something valuable. And right now, they don't really perceive any value from it, right? They're just like, hey, someone comes in, great. Now they're going to start looking at what they consider to be trash as a much more lucrative opportunity. So the early adopters that are going to come into this, I wouldn't say take advantage is the right word, but they're going to be able to take advantage of maybe the unknown of the usefulness of the wasted gas. Eventually, people are going to get smarter. We're going to go down a few years down the road, and these massive sites are going to say, we've got mining companies that want to capture our flare. We're going to charge them. So eventually, you're probably going to see a little leveling out. You're going to see some capitalism come into play. And you're going to eventually start to see these sites get a little bit smarter about what the real use case potentially of that flare is.
And that makes sense. Like, I didn't know that. So like, yeah, I mean, if you've got a large amount of capital, it's like, why even mess with it? Let's just get to something that's more scalable from a business perspective. But that leads me to ask you this question. These rates that you're getting, whatever those rates are those like locked in or are those subject to change?
Yeah, so the agreements that we'll be signing are in the range of 3 to 5 years. So we would be guaranteed that electric rate specifically for that term of the contract. Now, once it's time to renegotiate the contract, obviously rates could change. And it really just depends on where Bitcoin is specifically. And well, what really doesn't change is the oil operator. The oil operators still having to burn off that methane. For them, if we're able to capture that for them, still set up all the processes on their behalf, and they get to have the benefit of cashing in on carbon credits and stuff like that. For them, they don't want to spend the time, the money, or the effort, and they get paid to do nothing, and we do it all for them. You'll have some that say, "Hey, this is just some additional passive income for the oil operator," and on their behalf, we're doing all the infrastructure build out. So for them, depending on the contracts, depending on the relationships that you have, whether the prices will increase in 3 to 5 years after those contracts are signed is kind of hard to speculate. I mean, we do know that electricity itself has historically gone up over time due to inflation. So I could see a difference in price points due to inflation, but I don't know based on the actual energy itself whether that natural gas will increase in value that they consider to be waste. Waste becomes more valuable or not, only time will tell.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And I want to talk about what it is that you're mining. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. I want to ask what it is that you're mining or planning on mining. Why did you choose those things? And I guess, do you have the estimates as to how much you can mine of said tokens across those 3 to 5 year timeframes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting off with Bitcoin mining because to us, it makes the most sense. It's the lowest form of risk. And, when it comes to lower risk, you have lower reward. When it comes to Bitcoin, it's also the most regulated from a standpoint of not being a security. This is an ongoing conversation within U.S. regulators. So for us, the safest option to proof of work mining is Bitcoin. Now, specifically, a lot of people will, well, Bitcoin's very competitive. Well, it is, but the opportunity comes that as you've started to see a lot of these mining companies go bankrupt, they've gone bankrupt based on two reasons. One, they took out loans they couldn't pay in the middle of a bull market last year. And so they took out loans based on what they were making then, not what they're making now, right? And so on top of that, you've got a lot of mining companies that have very outdated equipment. So it's very, very poorly managed. You've got some sites that they just aren't even online because it's just unprofitable. So if you actually peel back a lot of the operations behind a lot of these companies, it's not very well operated. So from our perspective, when we look at getting into Bitcoin mining, is almost being an example to a lot of the mining companies that aren't upgrading infrastructure well or along times that if it comes available, upgrading it and staying on the front edge or the cutting edge, if you will, of newer technology, better efficiency. And when it comes to the rising electric cost, with most of your mining operations being on grid, eventually it's going to squeeze some of them out. You've started to see, Compute North will go bankrupt. You see Core Scientific struggling. Iris Energy had to take off like 4.2 Equihash. So you've seen a lot of these companies go bust. You're kind of seeing where their failure of operations lies over the past year. They all look good in November of 2021, but now they're not so good. So Bitcoin for us specifically is an opportunity of a lifetime, especially based on the price points of ASICs. So we've gotten access through our partners to get access to liquidation cells. So Compute North goes bankrupt. They have to sell off a bunch of infrastructure. We're able to pick all that infrastructure up for pennies on the dollar. So when you're talking about getting in, it's almost perfect timing of the ASIC market itself, because these same miners that we're paying 1/10 of the price for were in range of 12 to 15,000 last year. So Bitcoin in itself, long-term picture, it's got the largest community, it's got the largest following, it's got in my opinion, the best use case scenario compared to anything else that's proof of work related. So that's Bitcoin. That's going to be the focal point of fractional mining. Launch, we'll be estimating around 40 to 45 petahash. We'll be able to mine anywhere in the range of what we expect to be about 4 to 5 Bitcoin per month is our expectation. Every 6 months, we have our development side of things that will increase the overall hash rate by a portion of the revenues and the rewards from mining goes back into adding more Bitcoin miners. So you look at a year-long concept, it's hard to kind of speculate where we'll be in a year from now when it comes to mining Bitcoin, network hash rate, network difficulty. But we could easily see ourselves at full capacity, mining well over, if we're looking at where we are right now, probably over 20 Bitcoin a month once we're fully built out as a company. Now, secondarily, we're going to be mining Kadena. I think Kadena is by far the most hyped when it comes to altcoins that are proof of work mineable. Reason being is, well, we saw Kadena go from $1 to $28. So a lot of people see it as a more rewarding, a little bit higher risk opportunity. It's also the one where the KA3 recently launched, and that brought a lot of hype behind Kadena simply from the revenue potential. Earn $40 a day or earn $3 a day, right? Most people would choose the 40 over the 3. And so for us, we are going to be mining Kadena. That's going to be coming in the spring. For us, Kadena is a high risk reward opportunity. And so you'll probably see for Kadena itself, there's a lot of development that needs to continue happening for the project itself to kind of get a better foundation outside of just hype. Needs a little bit more fundamentals. And I think personally, if the fundamentals come sooner rather than later, Kadena will do extremely well. So for us, we're very interested in Kadena, but Kadena is definitely a backseat to Bitcoin mining. And that will be probably March timeframe that we'll see Kadena, will launch Kadena mining. Now, originally we were looking at Litecoin Doge merge mining. We are still looking at Litecoin Doge merge mining. The concern that we have right now is Vitalik Buterin is working with Doge to move Doge to proof of stake. same way he did with Ethereum. Now, recently we got word that Bitmain is pausing production on their L7s. Their L7s are by far the most profitable Litecoin miners in existence. So this had us question why Bitmain is pausing production of L7s for the next 6 months. And whether it ties into Doge coming in their timeline for their community to vote on moving to proof of stake. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not. But for us, we'd like to wait until a decision actually made by the community as to whether they'll vote Doge to go to proof of stake. If they stay proof of work, then that's definitely an opportunity available. But if Doge moves to proof of stake, the profitability of the L7s will go from about $20 today to sub $1, because Doge is the true money earner, if you will, with the L7s. Litecoin mining is really unprofitable directly with L7s. So for us, we're kind of pumping the brakes a little bit until we hear more word from that. We're thinking maybe the reason Bitmain paused production is due to this. They made a very big mistake with producing the E9 right before Ethereum moved to proof of stake. I probably lost them a lot of money. So I think they're maybe wanting to take a little bit more cautious approach to the uncertainty of Doge.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up, I would say this is an overall risk of mining is the environment changes pretty quickly. Like it's, you can buy one mine and then, and then something happens, or let alone not even talking about going like switching up the entire mechanism from what the crypto is built on. How do you hedge against that? Like, how do you, when you're purchasing this for, and then, whether you're upgrading a current system or purchasing a new one, like, how do you factor that in to your entire operation?
Yeah, so because like when the KA3 came out, right, the KD maxes are completely irrelevant at this point, right?
Yep.
So the value of the KD maxes went from, some people spent $50,000 of them on them 6 months ago, and now they're selling for like 3,000. So, and they're next to unprofitable. So, KA3 comes out, makes it completely irrelevant. So there's kind of two ways that you can prepare for this. The first being is you have people that know people, right? The nice thing for me specifically is I know Michael Liu. He's a part owner of Bitmain, and he's good friends with the founders. So we have kind of a little bit of an insight on, he invited us to participate in the KA3 pre-mine for Cadena. So we weren't at a point to be able to do that. But when you know people in this specific space to be able to get into something like that, it's great. So if you know people that know people, then I can give you a little bit of a heads up before you get into, make a poor investment decision of buying, tons of miners for yourself, or getting involved in a specific set of a Bitcoin miner, Canadian miner, whatever it is. And that's why we pump the brakes on the L7s. Now, on top of that, the other way to kind of time it is, one, you can kind of know when companies come out with equipment. Typically, you'll see Bitmain on their Bitcoin miners. Usually it's a yearly or bi-yearly thing. So if you know mining and are well-versed in mining, you can kind of prepare ahead of time when to get rid of some of your equipment to allow to kind of prepare yourself for newer equipment to coming out. Now, in addition, you can always work with certain softwares that are utilized specifically for overclocking features of ASICs. So there was a recent one that came out that we've got access to that increases the efficiency of the S19 Pro by 30%. So you have still the same hash rate, but the overall electricity consumption has gone down by 400 watts, which you multiply that by 400 units. That's vast difference from a profitability margin perspective. So you always have firmware and software that's available to you that you can utilize to pretty much similar to like GPU mining. If you can overclock certain features, you can get better use case out of those specific GPUs. And something very similar can happen with Bitcoin miners. And that way you can still somewhat do pretty good with your current device without having to scrape it, buy a brand new one. So it's definitely difficult for us. That's why we have the every 6 months, we kind of reevaluate, look at opportunities. and maybe upgrade some miners or purchase additional ones to increase hash rate.
Gotcha. And I mean, you mentioned like, connections are huge, just being well versed in mining in particular. Can you talk about your team? Like, I guess, how big is your team? And then as the CEO, what's your past experience with bringing on people and building an organization?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously I'm the CEO. I'll talk about myself in just a second. So Joshua Belk, he is our CDO, Chief Development Officer, or digital officer, however you want to word that. There's a lot of CDO terms you can put in there, but he's specifically on the technology side of things. He's extremely well versed. You can check out his LinkedIn. He is, from what I can say, he works for the Department of Defense. He has a higher level security clearance than I do. So he's extremely experienced, works multi-facets within the United States contracting side of things for senior development across the Department of Defense. So national security based. Very well versed. He himself has a lot of experience taking startups from zero to over $100 million. He's designed websites for some of the biggest brands. I believe Nike was one of them. Designed a couple of other websites specifically for a large amount of companies that you probably don't notice. And when you're shopping on the website, and you're like, Joshua Duck was the one who designed it. James Maloney, he is in Canada. And mind you, one of the things, Chris, is I've met the majority of these people. Like I've sat down, had dinner with them, or I've known them in the past, which is really, really unique. You don't find that in a lot of teams. And James has his own electric company. Very well versed on the infrastructure side of things. And the one thing you also notice is all the people on the team are all businessmen or businesswomen. And so James Maloney, he is the chief operating officer. He's very well versed in operations, putting a team together and making things happen. Josh Nye, he comes from a bit of a marketing background. He owns his own flooring company as well. So very experienced. He's definitely one of the older guys on the team. Mike Boom, he's part of the community management. Mike has a lot of experience on Twitch, has had prior partnerships with like G Fuel and stuff like that. Very well versed when it comes to building communities and communities themselves. Natosha, I always butcher her last name, Libertowski. She is in a lot of Discords, very well known across the crypto space. So having that form of experience is great. Major Brightwell, he and I go way back to like 2018, 2019. He and I worked both at a same sales company. He's got an experience in management. He's going to be our business to business point of contact, handling our business to business side of things. And then I myself, I have within the Air Force, I'm aerospace ground equipment. So I have a lot of experience when it comes to generators and operating those specifically. That's pretty much what I went to tech school. Technical school, if you will, for about 6 months, learning the intricacies of everything within that specifically. And then myself, that one of the reasons I brought the individuals I brought to Fractional Mining is they're all, like I mentioned, businessmen. These are people who have had businesses that were extremely successful or currently own and operate their current businesses. You know this, Chris, right? You have your own business. You know how the ins and outs go. And when you have people with business acumen, you know that they know how to run a company. And so myself specifically, I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, from my dad, who's had one successful company that, owned 60 music studios across the United States, extremely successful, had deals with Disney back in, I don't know, the 70s, 80s for Disney Studios, very successful, and then started another company that he recently sold, retired, in as far as management. So I grew up from the age of 7 to like 19 in a business household. So knowing how businesses were run very much on the inside, growing up in that was very, eye-opening and a wealth of knowledge in and of itself. So taking that experience, building out a team that knows what they're doing is something that's hard to find in the industry, but I think we're doing it very well.
Yeah. So it's not just like you and another guy or whatever, building this out of you have like a whole team around you. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that lets me know a lot. Yeah. So I want to talk about the tokenomics and just like, can you talk about, I guess, what chain are you launching this thing on? What exactly, how is this being structured? The dates, how, I'm assuming you're using NFTs, the price point. Can you talk about all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a top down, you've got everything on Polygon. I think Polygon's self-explanatory. It's the lowest fees. It's the best scaling opportunity. It really is just really, really good. So you've got Polygon is where everything is on. The NFT specifically, you've got membership NFTs, and then you have the BTC NFTs themselves, or the proof of work crypto NFTs, if you will, because we'll have separate NFTs for Cadena, separate NFTs if we do other proof of work cryptocurrencies. So very briefly, the membership NFTs, those are $25 a year in Matic. Those specifically have a few functions. One, they offer wholesale pricing for miners. So if you don't want to spend retail costs, you want to spend $25 to be able to access wholesale pricing. That's a no-brainer for a lot of people. It is exclusive to where you get access directly to Fractional Mining merch. If you don't have a membership, you can't gain access to it. And then on top of that, you'll have the opportunity that the membership NFT is based on a Web5 concept. So what it allows you to do is input within an NFT itself your different wallet addresses for the underlying proof of work cryptocurrency that you're mining. So you can put in your Bitcoin address, you can put in your Cadena address, you can put in all of your different addresses within one NFT on a smart contract. It's very, very unique. It's very newer technology. So that is something very exciting, something that's being kind of designed by our CDO, Chief Digital Officer. And then you have the NFT that's specifically for Bitcoin, specifically for Cadena, and then other proof of work cryptocurrencies. Now, since we're launching Bitcoin first, we'll talk about that one. The membership NFTs are currently available. We have 2,500 membership NFTs. We expect as the community grows, we launched enough that we'll have enough for Bitcoin, we'll have enough for Cadena, and as more people get introduced to our community and to our project, there'll be enough for everybody. It's kind of how we've designed it. Now, the BTC NFTs are representative of hash rate. So each NFT is about 10 to 12 terahash is what we're expecting based on the overall initial launch of Fractional Mining. Now, the NFTs themselves are then tied to the membership. So your NFTs pretty much communicate with each other, and that's how you're able to claim directly into the underlying mining that you're doing. So if you're mining Bitcoin, you get paid out in Bitcoin, or you actively claim Bitcoin. So the membership NFTs, that's what they're specifically designed to do. The Bitcoin NFTs, like I mentioned, represent 10 to 12 terahash, and that increases over time. About every 6 months, we'll have a opportunity to increase the hash rate through addition of miners, or by having better technology, whether we add more miners or replace miners to get more efficient ones. That's kind of the opportunity that we're doing every 6 months. Now, from the reward breakdown, because you're purchasing a service, this is kind of like going in and getting a type of service, and that service is represented via an NFT. So in return for the service, the reward that's being broken down is 70% of the rewards go to the NFT holders, 24% goes to the improvement / development / growth, and then 6% goes to team and partners. So the way that it's broken down based on the structure, 94% of the rewards go directly back to the community based on the service contracts. And only 6% goes to the team and partners. And of that 6%, only 3% goes to the team. So when you've got a project that is specifically focused on giving as much back to the community, making sure that when you're purchasing that agreement and getting that contract signed, you're getting what you're asking for is kind of what we're wanting to do from an operational standpoint. So from that breakdown, right, you've got Polygon, 2 NFTs. If you have a membership NFT, you can purchase 10 BTC NFTs. You can purchase 1. You only have to have 1 membership per how many ever BTC NFTs you want. And there's no really, like, you want to go to a gem and buy 10 gem memberships, right, for yourself. So we have some individuals that have purchased some to give out to friends, and we have some that just want to hold a few. So but you only need one membership NFT for how many ever you want, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Cadena, or other proof of work cryptocurrencies.
So I couldn't buy, like, let's say I bought one membership NFT, but I wanted to buy 3 NFTs for like my mom, my dad, and my brother. They couldn't, it would still all be tied to my one membership NFT, correct? Is that what you mean? Like if I were the one to do that, like each one, like each wallet address has to have a membership NFT, because am I understanding that right? So like every NFT that's purchased with the membership is linked to that membership NFT. Is that how that goes, or am I misunderstanding?
Yeah. So like when you purchase a membership NFT, right, that is in your wallet, right? And that's what you use to put in your Bitcoin address, your Cadena address, or something.
Oh, like okay.
Right? So if you want to buy a membership, if you want to buy like 5 membership NFTs, right? They last a year, and then in a year from now, you'll have to purchase a new membership NFT. So if right now I hold 10 membership NFTs because I want to eventually gift that out to someone else. So I can just transfer that NFT to someone else, but they specifically then have to customize the wallet addresses within their own NFT, right? To that way, if they have a BTC NFT, that NFT will read how much hash rate that they have within their wallet, specifically through the amount of Bitcoin NFTs that they hold. And then
Gotcha.
that's the rewards are accumulated, and 70% goes directly to them.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering. Mainly, the reason why I asked that question is from a standpoint of like transfer of ownership, right? Like, let's say I want to sell my NFT, or people swing trade NFTs and all that stuff. So no, that makes sense. And what would you, and like, are you guys compounding for a few months, like what, before to get up and running, or is it immediately just like, here you go?
Yeah. So ideally, we're not really, every project has their own approach, right? For us, if you're purchasing a product, you don't want to wait 6 months to receive that product, right? That you purchased. I've never purchased something from Amazon and waited 6 months to get it. So unless it was, back when helium was really popular, helium mining, people were purchasing, Bobcats and waiting 6 months because to them it was worth waiting 6 months. So, from our perspective, once we're operational, which we expect to be in February, which is pretty much about 2.5 months from now, the rewards will start accumulating automatically. It's as if you just connected your NFT, you plugged in your miner. You don't wait 6 months for your miner. You don't wait 2 months for your miner to start earning you the Bitcoin. If I plugged in my miner, Bitcoin miner at home, I don't wait 6 months from the pool to start distributing the Bitcoin, right? That is an immediate thing. So that's the way that we're going to be setting up and proceeding with the project.
And are those Bitcoin NFTs? You mentioned like a range, like between like 10 and 12 hash rate, I think you said.
Yeah.
Or is it every NFT receives the same amount, or are some going to receive 12 and some are going to receive 10, or is it just everyone receives the same amount?
Yeah, so everyone's going to receive the same amount because the price point. So the BTC NFTs are going to be $300. That's how we plan on structuring all of our NFTs. That could change depending on market conditions in a year from now, right? And we can talk about that as well. But when you have each NFT, there's going to be 2,500 BTC NFTs. Each NFT is $300. So each individual, it really just depends on the price points that we get on the ASICs. And that's what really is a differentiating factor as to whether each one of the BTC NFTs will have 10 terahash, it could have 12, it could have 15. Really just depends on how many miners we acquire and the price point of those miners. So if we're starting off with, if we did the calculation of 40 petahash, we're probably going to be closer to around 10 terahash per NFT. If we're at 45 petahash, based on us acquiring 400 miners, then we're probably closer to around 12 terahash per NFT.
Gotcha. Okay. And I want to ask too, I guess, like, what are your, what's your take on the whole, like, like you mentioned, people are in essence purchasing a service here. Like you're getting the mines up and running, you're taking the a large part of the cost out of the equation, but it's still in the sense of we're, trusting this, like it's kind of like the whole saying, not your keys, not your crypto. With these NFT projects, the way it works, and I want to lay this out for people listening if you've never been in these types of projects. Essentially, you're foregoing your asset for this contract that says, you know, like these services in this case you're entitled to these services.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is what's the word? What systems do you have in place that are going to ensure that you and your team are going to fulfill the job? Because I personally think the biggest risk in all of crypto, for better or for worse, are the people. Like we are, like whether it's the human condition or whatever, and the law hasn't come in yet. Like we are, the SEC hasn't. So we are still a huge risk. So what systems do you have to where, you know, I'm just playing devil's advocate. That's all.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
Yeah, because you know, the very first approach that I had, and this was something that, you know, a lot of people brought up to me, because about 5 months ago on my YouTube channel, I had put out a video. I was like, listen, a lot of these projects are just starting out, coming out of the woodworks, just all these, some people are inexperienced, some projects hiding behind JPEGs, some of them not even being like official. Like, how do you really know? Because you don't ever own the infrastructure, right? So you're committing a level of trust and faith to the individuals who are behind JPEGs that they're not going to just run away with the equipment, right? That was kind of a roundabout way of putting it, is like, how can you trust the people that you're purchasing NFTs and these services from? And we've seen some, you know, over the past 5 months. That's why I wanted to set up a call and an interview with and talk to Sam Pittman, is because we've seen how Hydro Wells Club has done, right? We've seen them be successful over the past 5 months. You know, perspectives change. There's still some projects that I talked about in that video that I don't like, and that's simply just from a transparency standpoint. And so when we looked at fractional mining, and the one thing that you'll see, if you will, preached within our community, within our project, within everything we do, is transparency is the foundation of fractional mining. Because when you lack transparency, you lack confidence in the underlying community and the individuals that are there for the project. Because if it wasn't for the individuals, the project wouldn't exist. So you have to have a level of due diligence to the individual that's supporting your project, and give them as much transparency into what you're doing as much as possible. Now, outside of transparency, there's a legalese and a regulatory standpoint of companies and projects themselves. You'll see some that try to operate outside of the United States that don't do their due diligence, their proper research on how to properly structure themselves. And that's one thing that, based on the current regulatory standards, based on what's currently acceptable within the United States, that's how we've set up fractional mining. Now, who's to say in a year from now, certain regulation gets passed or doesn't get passed? We really don't know. It's kind of one of the risks, if you will, within the breakthrough technology of NFTs, within everything crypto, is it's still not very much regulated, right? So for where we are right now, we've taken the proper steps to make sure that our services that are offered, our products, are all within boundaries of regulation. So that's one of the big things for us. And we have approached and had discussions with individuals who are experienced in instances like this. And we haven't just used our personal opinion. We haven't said, oh, I feel this about this rule, or I feel this about that rule, and that's okay. So that's the one thing. We are a registered LLC. We are a formed company specifically out of Wyoming. Every single individual that's on the team is, well, we're not KYC because we're all on the website docs, first name, last name. If we have a LinkedIn, it's there. So, you know, that provides a level of trust and transparency. And for a lot of us, you know, when me specifically, there's a lot of risk to myself going and doing something like this, right? And similar to you, right, Chris, is when you have a brand, you have an image that people see on, whether it's social media or whatever it may be. If something goes wrong, if something happens that's bad, or you go rogue, if you will, MIA, that hurts your overall future potential as a brand, right? So for me, out of the rest of the team, I would say I'd probably have the highest
exposure.
Highest exposure. The most to lose if fraction mining fails or if something goes wrong, because at that point, the career within the future of the Air Force, whether or not that could be jeopardized, I'm not sure, but the overall career within YouTube, the opportunity of the trust that I have within the community, and being a public face provides an extra layer of like, hey, everyone knows who you are, everyone sees your face. So for us, we have certain processes in place. We have the structure as far as an LLC. We'll have the overall opportunities for, once we're operational, for having individuals that want to come see the operations. We'll have the opportunity as far as the transparency of who we're working with. We're going to provide as much transparency as possible outside of NDAs that may be signed that from a legal standpoint we can't disclose. But for us, transparency is really the biggest thing. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, we're still going to be transparent about it. So for us, that was one of the things. Trying to think, from a contract and smart contract standpoint, the way that the smart contract is handled is through Gnosis, through a multi-sig. So there are individuals to that aspect that not one individual can go rogue, if you will. And then to a certain level within the team itself, I know, or I've met and had spent time with other individuals on the team. You have a lot of teams that someone's in Canada, someone's in India, someone's in Russia, someone's in Africa, someone's in the UK, someone's in Mexico, someone's in Brazil, and they're all remote and they have no opportunity to actually meet and get to know the individual who's behind it. So that's one of I think the most interesting aspects about the team is the majority of us have either met or gone and toured mining locations together. Outside of, James, he's in Canada, so it's a little bit difficult, but with the whole COVID thing. But, with that specifically, I think that's, we've done as much as we can to gain that level of trust within our community. And if there's opportunities for us to do more, we're 100% behind it.
Yeah, and you bring up a unique point how, as someone, you're really the only one on the team who has a public brand. And that's one of the reasons why, I've had people come to me and they're like, hey, like I was actually a 10% owner of a project, and then I stepped out because I wasn't the CEO and there were too many things that I had to control, like that I wouldn't be able to as a 10% owner. But I was at 100% risk. So yeah. I think it's awesome that you're a CEO, but you kind of, and I've not asked anyone this yet on Better Blockchain because I don't think it's really been fitting, but someone who does have a public brand and who also, who has a public brand, but is also launching his own project. You mentioned how there's definitely a direct incentive for YouTubers. And some people don't see it. Like some people just don't see it. But there is a direct incentive for YouTubers or people with that type of exposure to not lie, cheat, steal, whatever. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at it from a macro perspective, there's so much more to gain. Like I'm a big believer in incentives. Like long term, I know that if I continually stay on the right path, I'll make much more money by not, like taking a short little payout, right? But yeah. When you remove that layer, right, there's a deeper layer of, let's say those incentives are gone. Let's say someone offers you $100 million. Those incentives are out the window. And so like my question for you is, do you have a sellout point? Like, and I know it's like a pretty like softball question, like, but I just to kind of start the conversation and to kind of piggyback on that, what are the values of fraction mining? What are the values there? Because as the CEO and the top level of individuals, that trickles downward into all aspects of the organization. So I kind of want your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So when I started fraction mining, because I started this and then I brought in people who I thought would be of a good fit, people that knew other individuals in the space. I said, I want 94% of the overall reward structure to go back to the community. So when we did that and we committed to that, and I don't mind personally sharing this. At launch, I myself will be earning $300 a month from the project, right? And mind you, I'm getting out of the Air Force soon, so I won't have like a committed full-time job. There won't be any form of additional revenue outside of YouTube specifically. So I can't think of any CEOs that go and take a full-time job or become a CEO to earn $300 a month. That maybe pay for my gas in a month, right? So the way that we looked at it and the way we wanted to set this up is Fraction Mining and the individuals, the other senior leadership at Fraction Mining, there's no direct monetary incentive until the entire project is completely built out. And what I mean by that is individuals on the team won't be earning, if you look at most CEOs, they earn well over 6 figures. That won't come until Fraction Mining is 100% completely built out and completely successful. That means we're going to have a community of over 10,000 people. That doesn't happen overnight. This is going to be a continual grind for Fraction Mining. There's no incentive to get in. There's no get rich quick opportunity with this. And it was designed that way because I was absolutely just tired of these individuals that we've seen in this space say, oh, I pay myself $100,000 a week and you should be grateful that I'm only taking that much. Or people that come in and say, hey, I'm the founder of this project. I get to do whatever I want and I'm going to take the majority of this. I'm going to pay myself, I'm going to take 50% of the token allocation because I'm somebody somewhere and I took the risk. For me, it's not about, it's very much a selfless opportunity rather than a selfish opportunity. And the reason being is there needs to be a change in the space that people that have gone into crypto get out because of selfish people like FTX and St. Bankman-Fried. You've got people that are only money hungry and only in it for the money. And that is why so many people leave the crypto space because they're typically the leader to the downfall of something usually happening. It always comes from a level of greed. And so when you take that level, the greed out of the equation, you have something much more fundamental and much more structured to actually help the end user. So the way that we took greed out of the equation is we made it where the tokenomics, or if you will, it's not really tokenomics, but the overall structure of the operations makes it where greed isn't even a factor. I mean, I guess, in the United States specifically, people really aren't going to get greedy about $300 a month. You could get greedy about $10,000 a month, right? But that's not something that's going to be truly seen until at least 3 to 5 years from now within the project. And even for me specifically, I've been in situations where money looks good and it could look good very early on, but we've seen the past experience, those who were sponsored by FTX specifically, right? Getting paid, some YouTubers $50,000 to $100,000 a month to promote FTX. Binance approached me. I had crypto.com approach me. I've had multiple exchanges approach me to sponsor the channel. Had a conversation with Binance, but there's moving forward, the value of the opportunity that if you can give value to individuals without having to say or extracting that value directly from them, and you can give them as much value as possible, that's really the fundamental focus of Fraction Mining is if we can give that value without having to take something in return that takes away from what they're getting, that's what we're really focused on. So obviously, we have to have a little level of reward and opportunity for the team to wake up out of bed to make this a success. But it's not something that happens overnight. And neither do any startups, right? No startup just becomes successful overnight or very few. It takes time, it takes diligence, it takes effort. And that's exactly how Fraction Mining is structured.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it great. And I think that's awesome that you guys are leading in that path. And that's what I'm really trying to understand is it seems like the startup space is so different from the crypto space because these startups, yes, they're raising money, but and then they're reinvesting so much back into the business. And I'm not for founders being, uncomfortable. Like, I think that's important. I do think it is important. And bootstrapping, but like some of these protocols, like you said, are taking 50, percent of their raise or whatever. I mean, even less than that, and it's like, I think this is a good point in the right direction. I didn't know any of that. So thanks for sharing that, man. I appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you too, like, who do you like, I guess, like, what's your end goal here? Like, what's your end goal? You have these mining projects like hydro whales, like they're kind of like I asked Sam in an interview and he's like, look, I'm not really trying to, well, this is specifically with Project 79, but he was like, look, I'm not trying to like increase these gold contracts. I kind of just want to keep it here. And then it seems like he's kind of like launching other stuff around that. Like, what's your end game here or goal with fraction mining?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people like have compared us to Hydro Whales Club just because we're both in Bitcoin mining specifically. Now, Hydro Whales is getting involved in a lot of things outside of proof of work crypto, right?
Yep.
So, to that extent, if you want exposure to a lot of other things outside of mining and you want exposure to DeFi, Hydro Whales is great. For us, we're sticking solely to proof of work. The main thing for us is it's great to have proof of work, but the backbone is really our focal point, and that is Flare, right? The World Bank organization is trying to get countries to commit to what's called ZRF by 2030. So zero routine flaring in the next 7 years. So when you look at this narrative that's being pushed by predominant media of Bitcoin is bad because mining Bitcoin is terrible for the environment, if you can change that narrative in the next decade to showcase that Bitcoin was the solution to getting rid of routine flaring worldwide that causes these carbon emissions from an environmental standpoint, Bitcoin becomes the solution that the whole world has been looking for the last 5 to 10 years to get rid of this routine flaring that's happening around the globe. So imagine the narrative that Bitcoin will have built around it. You're not going to have states like New York trying to ban Bitcoin. They're going to try to get as many Bitcoin companies involved in their flaring sites to get rid of that flare. And there's going to be massive, massive open doors. That's what we're really focused in on. We're wanting to, what ExxonMobil's done with Caruso is really a pilot for the entire world to look at and say, ExxonMobil, by far one of the largest oil companies in the world, is solving a solution to flare that hasn't been solved in a very long time at a much larger scale than most have done in the past. So we want to build on that and use that as a changing of the narrative over the next 7 years, that when people look back in 2030, and mind you, that's like an eternity in crypto. When people look at it in 2030, they can look back and say, hey, Bitcoin was the solution to zero routine flaring. And that is a vast narrative change to where the opinions and discussions are on current Bitcoin mining processes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, thanks for sharing that. I totally see. I think that something's going to have to change by 2030. Yeah. And I think this is a very interesting project to do that, to orchestrate that. And you guys have you're focusing on building this community. Where can we find you? Where can we follow along with all the updates? What's that like?
Sure. So you can obviously find us at fractionmining.com. We do have a Twitter, and obviously Discord is always a great place. We don't have a Telegram. I hate Telegram. So
me too.
We push against that. So, but we do have a fantastic Discord community. So you can definitely check it out in the Discord, and obviously the website, the Twitter. We do have possibly some more, we've got a LinkedIn, we've got Reddit, but it's not something that, Facebook is not something that we're really active on right now. But primarily in the Discord is the best way to find us.
And your YouTube channel, Tactical Investing. Can't forget that. Link to everything will be down below. Hey, thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot for coming on. I know we've been talking via voice message. This was like the first time we've ever connected via a video call. So, sure. After following you for over a year now, it was awesome to get to connect with you on this video call, man. To stay up to date with things that are going on. So, I'd love to have you back on in the future. Maybe it gets closer to launch. So if you're watching, be sure to subscribe for not only new projects, but projects that are out here, just changing the way crypto operates. So once again, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris.